The wind screamed through the trees like something alive. The small wooden cabin shuddered under the force of it, every window rattling, every door frame groaning. Ilara Voss sat by the fire wrapped in an old wool blanket, staring into the flames as if they could speak back to her. The firelight painted her face in gold and shadow, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes and the lines of exhaustion carved into her expression. She looked like someone who had forgotten how to smile. Rain pounded the roof in wild rhythm. The smell of damp wood filled the room, mixing with the faint scent of cedar and smoke. Her tea had gone cold on the table beside her, untouched. Ilara sighed, rubbing her hands together for warmth. "You'd think I'd get used to this quiet," she muttered to herself. Her voice sounded strange, too loud in the stillness. "But it just feels heavier every day." Her only answer was the howl of the storm outside. It had been 3 months since she left the city. 3 months since she'd packed her life into the back of her old car and driven until the skyline disappeared behind her. The cabin had once belonged to her grandfather, a kind, quiet man who loved the forest more than people. He used to call this place sanctuary. Now it felt more like exile. She picked up a photograph lying face down on the table. It was of her and Marcus, taken 2 years ago. His smile was perfect, polished, the kind that looked good in business magazines. He had his arm around her shoulders, but even then, she could see it in his eyes, that small, assessing distance. When the doctor had said the word infertile, Marcus hadn't shouted. He hadn't cried. He just stared at the floor for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe we should take some time apart." Time apart. That was how he ended things, as if love were a business meeting gone cold. She dropped the photo into the fire. The edges curled and blackened. "Good riddance," she whispered. A sharp crash outside made her flinch. Probably just a branch, she thought. But her pulse quickened all the same. The storm had grown worse, thunder rolled across the valley like cannon fire, and lightning flashed white through the windows. Ilara stood, walking to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The forest was a blur of movement, trees bending, rain whipping sideways. She could see the faint shape of the old barn a few meters away, its roof sagging. Another gust slammed against the wall, and the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then, darkness. "Perfect," she muttered, fumbling for the box of matches on the mantel. The fire was still burning, but the shadows seemed to grow thicker, pressing in around her. She lit a candle and carried it to the kitchen, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. For a while, she sat in silence, listening to the storm rage outside. The cabin creaked like an old ship lost at sea. Her stomach rumbled, she hadn't eaten much all day. She opened a can of soup, heating it over the fire, watching the steam rise. When she finally sat down to eat, the loneliness hit harder than ever. The chair opposite her remained empty, just as it had been for months. "Guess it's just you and me," she said to the fire. Again. She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. A sudden thud shook the wall. Louder this time. Not wind. Not wood. Something heavy had hit the porch. Ilara froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. For a few seconds, all she could hear was the pounding of her heart. Then it came again. A scraping sound. A low, muffled whine. Her breath caught. "Oh God, what is that?" She grabbed the poker from beside the fire, it was long and heavy, cold in her trembling hands. Slowly, she moved toward the front door. The sound came again, softer this time. A kind of broken cry. "Maybe an animal," she whispered. "Just an animal trying to get out of the rain." But another thought whispered back, or something else entirely. She reached for the doorknob. The metal was freezing. She hesitated. "Okay, Ilara," she murmured. "It's probably just a raccoon. Or a deer. Or a bear. Oh God, please don't be a bear." She opened the door. The wind tore it from her grip, slamming it against the wall. Rain exploded inside, soaking her instantly. She blinked through the downpour and froze. There, sprawled across her porch, was a massive black wolf. Its fur was matted and glistening with blood. One of its front legs twisted at a strange angle. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, shuddering breaths. Lightning flashed, and for an instant, She saw its eyes, not yellow like a normal wolf's, but molten gold. And pressed against its side, trembling violently, was a tiny cub. Ilara's heart slammed in her chest. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You poor things." The cub whimpered, pushing its small nose against the larger wolf's neck. The adult didn't move. Everything inside her screamed to shut the door, to run back inside, lock it, and wait for morning. But she couldn't. Not when something so helpless was crying in front of her. She dropped the poker and knelt, rain soaking through her clothes. "It's okay," she whispered, voice shaking. "I won't hurt you. I just want to help." The great wolf's head lifted slightly. One golden eye met hers, glowing in the candlelight spilling from the door. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. There was no storm, no fear, just that look. Intelligent. Ancient. Then its head fell back down. "Okay," Ilara said, voice trembling. "Okay. Let's get you inside." The wolf was heavier than she expected, far heavier. She dragged an old top from the mudroom, sliding it under him as best she could. Every time she pulled, the top scraped across the wet porch, her muscles burning. "Come on," she gasped. "Don't you dare die on me." The cub stayed close, whining softly, as if urging her on. It kept nudging the big wolf's ear, its tiny body shaking with cold. When she finally dragged the creature through the doorway, she collapsed against the wall, panting. Mud and blood streaked the floor. The smell was sharp iron and rain and something wild. The wolf lay still, sides rising and falling faintly. The cub curled up beside its chest, letting out a pitiful whine. Ilara's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the candle. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. I can do this. Grandpa would know what to do." Her grandfather had been a veterinarian. She'd watched him treat wild animals before, foxes, deer, even an injured owl once. She tried to remember what he used to say. "Stay calm. Move slow. Show them your hands." She took a few deep breaths and began gathering what supplies she had: towels, hot water, a small first aid kit. She tore one of her old shirts into strips for bandages. When she returned, the wolf's golden eyes were half open, following her every move. The cub growled softly, a tiny, helpless sound that somehow made her smile. "It's all right," she said gently. "I'm not your enemy." She knelt beside the wolf. The wound on his side was deep, a long gash that looked like it came from metal, not teeth. Maybe a trap. She didn't want to think about that. "This is going to hurt," she said quietly, dipping a towel into the warm water. "But you'll feel better after." As the cloth touched his wound, the wolf flinched hard, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Ilara froze. I'm sorry, she whispered quickly. "I'll be gentle, I promise." The wolf's growl faded to a heavy breath. His eyes stayed on her, unblinking, aware. "That's it," she said softly. "Good boy. Just a bit more." She cleaned the wound as best she could, wiping away dirt and dried blood. The cub whimpered and pressed against the wolf's neck. "I think he's your baby," she said, voice trembling but calm. "You've been protecting him, haven't you?" The wolf gave a soft huff, almost like a sigh. Ilara smiled weakly. "Yeah. I'd protect him too." When she finished cleaning, she wrapped the bandage tightly around his side. Her hands were slick with blood, but she didn't stop until it was done. The wolf's breathing evened out, slower now, steady. She sat back on her heels, exhausted. "There. That's better, right?" The cub sniffed her fingers, then licked them once. Ilara let out a shaky laugh. "You're welcome, little one." She poured some water into a bowl and slid it close. The cub drank eagerly. The larger wolf sniffed it once before lowering his head to drink too. For a while, they sat like that, three creatures stranded together in a tiny cabin as the storm raged outside. The fire crackled, and the candlelight flickered across the wolf's fur, making him look almost unreal, like something out of a legend. Ilara leaned against the wall, watching him. "You're not just any wolf, are you?" she whispered. He blinked slowly, golden eyes glowing in the dim light. She smiled faintly. "Didn't think so." The cub yawned, curling into a small ball beside its father. Ilara found herself smiling again, a real smile this time, small but true. The cabin didn't feel quite as empty anymore. As the night deepened, she sat by the fire, writing in her old journal. Her handwriting shook slightly. I thought I came here to hide from the world. But maybe the world came looking for me anyway. There's something about that wolf. He doesn't feel like an animal. He feels like someone watching back. She closed the journal, glancing toward the makeshift bed she'd made for them near the fire. Both wolves were asleep now. The cub's tiny chest rose and fell against the larger one's side. The big wolf's ears twitched occasionally, as if dreaming. Ilara stood and walked closer, kneeling beside him. You'll be safe here, she whispered. I promise. She hesitated, then reached out, gently brushing her fingers through the wet fur on his head. It was coarse, thick and warm. The wolf didn't move. But as her hand lingered, she felt something, a faint vibration, like the echo of a heartbeat that wasn't hers. It made the hairs on her arms rise. She pulled back quickly, staring at her hand. What was that? The wolf stirred, letting out a low, rumbling breath that almost sounded like a word. She froze. Did you say something? She whispered. No answer. Only the sound of rain outside, softer now. She shook her head, laughing nervously. You're losing it, Ilara, she murmured. Talking to wolves now. But as she turned away, she could have sworn she heard a whisper in the back of her mind, not a sound, but a thought. Deep, ancient, and tired. Thank you. She spun around, heart racing. The wolf lay still, eyes closed. Maybe it was just her imagination. Maybe she was exhausted. Or maybe something far stranger had just begun. Outside, the storm began to fade, but the forest wasn't silent. Somewhere beyond the trees, a distant howl echoed, long, haunting, and full of warning. Inside, by the dim firelight, Ilara sat watching over the sleeping beasts, unaware that her life and her world had already changed forever. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it made Ilara's ears ring. The forest was heavy with mist, sunlight slanting through wet pines like pale gold ribbons. Every leaf glistened, every sound seemed louder than it should, the distant caw of a crow, the steady drip of rainwater from the eaves. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, reduced to glowing coals. The air smelled of smoke, wet wood, and something wild, wolf fur, musk, blood. Ilara stirred awake on the floor where she dozed off beside the hearth. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was or why there was a heavy breathing sound beside her. Then her eyes landed on the wolf. He was still there, lying on the blanket, his body massive and still. The cub slept curled against his side. Both were breathing evenly. Relief flooded through her like warmth. You're alive, she whispered, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Good morning, Miracle Wolf. She moved closer, cautious but calm. The big wolf's golden eye cracked open, following her quietly. She could swear there was recognition in that gaze, not the blank stare of an animal, but something intelligent, measuring her. It unnerved her and fascinated her all at once. I guess we're roommates now, she said softly. You and me. And the little one. She pointed at the cub, which had woken and was staring at her with wide, curious eyes. You hungry, huh? The cub gave a soft yip, tail twitching. It was all the answer she needed. In the kitchen, she rummaged through her limited supplies. Canned beans, instant noodles, rice, and a few strips of dried meat her grandfather had stored ages ago. She soaked the meat in warm water, shredding it into small pieces, and mixed it with rice and broth. The smell filled the cabin, and almost immediately she heard soft scratching behind her, the cub, sniffing the air. Patience, little one, she said, smiling. It's too hot for you right now. When it cooled, she placed the bowl on the floor near the fire. The cub wasted no time, diving in with hungry little sounds that made her laugh. She looked at the big wolf. You should eat too. You've got to get your strength back. He didn't move. His golden eyes flicked from the cub to her, and then back again. Then, slowly, he pushed the bowl closer to the cub with his nose. You want him to eat first, she murmured. Her throat tightened. You're protecting him. For some reason, that small act hit her harder than anything else. It was so human, so parental. She felt an ache in her chest, deep and old, like a wound she'd forgotten she had. Once the cub finished, the wolf finally ate what was left. Every movement he made seemed deliberate, dignified, as if he understood that she was watching. When he was done, he lowered his head again, eyes half-lidded. The cub crawled on top of him and fell asleep, tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the larger one. Ilara sat down across from them. "You're not just some animal," she said quietly. "I can feel it. You understand me, don't you?" The wolf's ear twitched, but he didn't move. She let out a shaky breath. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll take care of you. Both of you. That's a promise." For the rest of the day, she kept busy. She boiled water to clean the wound again, changed the bandage, and even brushed the mud from his fur with an old towel. Each time she touched him, the air seemed to hum faintly, as though her fingers brushed something alive beyond the skin, a current that wasn't quite natural. It made her heart race and her hands tremble. At one point, as she wrung out the cloth, she found herself talking without thinking. "You know," she said softly, "I came here to disappear. To stop hearing people whisper behind my back. Poor Ilara, the one who can't have kids." Her voice cracked. "Like I stopped being a person when they said that." She swallowed hard. The wolf blinked, his eyes catching the light like twin suns. He didn't move, but somehow, his stillness felt like listening. "I was engaged," she continued, her tone bitter and sad all at once. "Marcus, that was his name. Everything he ever said about love came with fine print. I love you, but, when I told him, he looked at me like I was broken. Like I was a defective product he needed to return." Her laugh was hollow. "I think that's when I stopped feeling warm." For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the soft sigh of the wind outside. Then, faintly, she thought she heard a low rumble, not quite a growl, more like a deep, resonant sound of sympathy. She looked up sharply. The wolf's gaze was steady, golden and kind. Her eyes stung. "You're a better listener than most humans, you know that?" The cub let out a small yawn, rolling onto its back. Ilara smiled through the tears that blurred her vision. That night, when she finally lay down on the couch, she felt something different, a sense of quiet that wasn't empty, but alive. The cabin didn't feel haunted by her memories anymore. It felt full. She drifted off to the sound of rainwater dripping from the roof and the slow, steady breathing of her two unexpected guests. By the third day, Ilara had built a rhythm. Feed the cub, clean the wound, talk to the wolf, rest, repeat. Her hands stopped shaking when she touched him. Her voice stopped trembling when she spoke. The fear that had ruled her since the night of the storm had faded into something else, curiosity, even comfort. Outside, the forest sparkled with sunlight after days of rain. The air smelled of pine and new earth. She opened the door to let the fresh wind in, smiling when the cub Rune, she decided to name him, ran clumsily across the floor to sniff the air. "Rune," she said with a grin, crouching down. "Do you like that name? You look like a rune." He wagged his tiny tail, licking her hand in approval. "And you," she said, turning to the large wolf still lying near the fire. "Kale. That's what I'll call you. It sounds strong. Like you." The wolf didn't react, but his eyes flicked toward her and blinked slowly, a kind of acknowledgement. She smiled. "Kale it is, then." Later, while boiling water for tea, Ilara found herself staring out the window toward the grey blur of the road far below the valley. Somewhere beyond those mountains was the city she'd left behind. Her old apartment. Her job. Her failed engagement. Her entire other life. The memory hit like a wave, harsh and cold. She could see Marcus's face as clear as if he stood before her. The careful way he'd folded his hands when she told him the doctor's news. The way he'd said, "You're sure there's no mistake," as if her body had simply failed a business plan. "It's not your fault," he'd said afterward, eyes distant, voice clinical. "But you have to understand, Ilara, I come from a family that expects." She'd walked out before he could finish. She never forgot the sound of the door closing behind her. It was the sound of something ending, the version of herself that believed she was enough. A soft huff brought her back. Kale was watching her. Somehow, she didn't feel embarrassed. She sighed. You wouldn't believe how quiet the city felt after he left. It's funny, I used to hate the noise. Then it stopped, and I realized the silence was worse. She crouched beside him again, gently changing his bandage. The wound looked better, not as red, not as swollen. Maybe the forest air was helping. Maybe the wolf's body was stronger than she thought. You're healing fast, she said with a faint smile. You're not going to sprout wings or anything, right? His tail twitched once, like a silent joke. She laughed. Good. I don't think I could handle any more surprises. As she worked, Rune padded up, dropping a piece of bark at her feet. Oh, you brought me a gift, she said, pretending to be amazed. Wow, the best bark in the whole forest. Thank you. Rune barked once in delight and ran in circles. Kale's golden eyes softened as he watched the cub, a look that made Ilara's heart twist. You love him, don't you? She whispered. You'd do anything to keep him safe. The wolf's ear flicked in quiet answer. Her chest tightened again. I know the feeling. She didn't explain what she meant. She didn't have to. That night, the temperature dropped again. Frost clung to the windows, and the cabin glowed warm and golden in contrast. Ilara sat near the fire with Rune asleep in her lap, Kale resting nearby. She'd never felt so peaceful in years, not since before the doctor, before Marcus, before everything fell apart. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself drift. Then she heard it, a low, distant noise. Not thunder this time. Something moving outside. Her eyes snapped open. Rune lifted his head, ears pricked. Kale's body tensed immediately, muscles coiling under his fur. Ilara set the cub down gently and stood. What is it? Kale's growl rumbled deep, vibrating through the floorboards. He looked toward the window. Outside, the trees swayed gently in the moonlight. Nothing seemed out of place, but she knew better now. She could feel it too, the way the air changed, sharp and electric. Is it another animal? She whispered. A bear. Kale's eyes flashed gold in the dark. He didn't look at her, he was listening, nostrils flaring. The growl deepened, turning into something low and warning. Rune whimpered, pressing against his side. A branch cracked outside. Then another. Ilara grabbed the poker from beside the fire. Okay, she said under her breath, heart racing. If it's a bear, we'll scare it off. If it's something worse, she didn't finish the thought. She took one cautious step toward the door, but Kale made a sharp sound, a bark that was not aggressive but commanding. She froze. You want me to stay here? She asked. He stared at her, unblinking, and made that sound again. Ilara swallowed. Okay. I'll stay. She backed away from the door. Kale rose, staggering slightly. He was still weak, but there was power in his movements, an ancient grace that sent chills down her spine. He walked to the window and peered out into the night. For a long, tense minute, nothing happened. Then, from far off, came a sound that made every hair on her body stand up, a howl. Not a normal one. It was deeper, stranger, filled with fury and grief. Rune whimpered again. Kale's growl answered it, low and fierce. Whatever was out there, it wasn't a bear. It wasn't human either. Ilara clutched the poker tighter, eyes wide. What's out there? She whispered. Kale, what is it? He turned his head slightly toward her, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw understanding in his eyes. Almost like an answer forming in her mind. A whisper, wordless but clear. Danger. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Outside, the howl came again, closer this time. Kale positioned himself between her and the door, his body a wall of black fur and muscle, every line of him radiating defiance. And in that moment, Ilara understood, whatever he wasn't just an animal. He was something ancient, something powerful, and the danger wasn't just coming for him. It was coming for them both. The fire crackled softly, the cub whimpered, and Ilara gripped the poker until her knuckles turned white. The forest outside had gone silent again, too silent, the kind of silence that comes before the world changes forever. And deep in her chest, beneath the fear, something stirred, a spark of courage she didn't know she still had. Whatever you are, she whispered to Kale, we'll face it together. The wolf's golden eyes gleamed like twin suns in the dark, as if to say, we already are. The night stretched on like a held breath. Ilara didn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin, every brush of wind against the walls, made her flinch. She sat beside the fire with Rune curled up in her lap and Kale lying nearby, his golden eyes open, unblinking, watching the door. The storm had gone, but the forest wasn't quiet. Somewhere beyond the pines, something moved, heavy, deliberate steps that stopped and started again, circling. Kale's ears twitched each time, his muscles coiling under his dark fur. When dawn came, it felt reluctant, as if the light itself feared entering that forest. Ilara stood and stretched, her bones aching. You heard it too, she said softly to Kale. He didn't move, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his nostrils flared slightly as he scented the air. I'm not crazy, right? Something's out there. Rune yawned, then barked once, a tiny, uncertain sound. It made her smile in spite of herself. Guess we're all on edge. After breakfast, a weak excuse for oatmeal and the last of her tea, she decided to go outside, just for a moment. She needed to see the damage from the storm, maybe get firewood. Kale tried to rise as she reached for the door, a warning growl low in his throat. She turned back to him. I'll be fine, she promised. It's daylight. Nothing scary happens in daylight, right? The wolf's eyes narrowed, unconvinced. Stay here with Rune. Guard duty. She smiled shakily, pretending bravery she didn't quite feel. I won't go far. Outside, the air was cold and wet, heavy with the smell of pine and rain. Mist clung to the trees like ghostly ribbons. She stepped off the porch, her boots sinking into the soft earth. Everything looked normal at first glance until she saw the tracks. They were deep and wide, clawed, sunk into the mud just beyond the steps. Something massive had passed through here during the night. The prints led toward the edge of the clearing, then vanished into the woods. Dear God, she whispered, crouching to study them. You're not a bear. The shape was wrong. Longer. Leaner. Like a wolf's paw, but far too large. A shiver crawled up her spine. She followed the trail a few meters, heart hammering. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds. No rustle of small animals. Only the steady drip of water and the soft thump of her heartbeat. Then she saw it, a broken tree near the tree line. And beside it, something metal glinted in the dirt. She knelt, brushing away leaves and mud, and her stomach turned. It was a trap, a steel-jawed snare, rusted and streaked with blood. Kale's blood. Her throat went dry. You poor thing, she murmured, touching the cruel metal. This did that to you. The thought of someone setting this here, in her grandfather's woods, filled her with anger so fierce it burned away the fear. She picked up a heavy stick and smashed the trap open with shaking hands until the jaws bent and twisted uselessly. Not again, she whispered, breathing hard. No more hurting things that don't deserve it. A sound snapped through the trees, a branch breaking. She froze, eyes darting toward the sound. Hello, she called. Who's there? No answer. Just the slow creak of trees swaying. Then a flicker of movement, a shadow slipping between the trunks, gone before she could see it clearly. Her pulse jumped. She backed away slowly, her breath fogging the air. Okay, she muttered, that's enough exploring for one day. She turned and stopped. A figure stood just inside the tree line, half hidden by mist. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes. Human. At least, she thought it was. Hey, she shouted, relief and fear colliding in her chest. Are you lost? The figure didn't move. Didn't speak. Then, just as suddenly, it turned and vanished into the forest. Ilara's blood ran cold. She didn't wait. She ran back toward the cabin, stumbling through the mud, the woods echoing with the thud of her boots. When she burst through the door, Kale was already on his feet, hackles raised, growling low and sharp. Something's out there, she gasped, slamming the door shut. Someone. Kale stalked to the window, peering out, his golden eyes glowing faintly. Ilara grabbed her grandfather's old rifle from above the mantel. She had never fired it before, but just holding it made her feel a little steadier. Don't come closer, she whispered to the door, though no one answered. I mean it. The woods stayed silent. Only the wind replied. For the rest of the day, she didn't leave the cabin. She kept the fire burning and the rifle close, every sense alert. Cale never relaxed either. He paced restlessly, ears twitching, nose testing the air. As dusk fell, she looked at him and said quietly, "Whoever's out there, they hurt you, didn't they?" Cale's gaze met hers, deep and haunted. He didn't need to answer. She already knew. When night came, she pushed the couch against the door and slept with the rifle beside her. Outside, the forest whispered. Something was coming. She woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, unnatural quiet that comes before a storm or a predator. The fire had burned down to ash. Grey morning light filtered through the curtains. Rune whimpered softly from where he lay curled near Cale. The big wolf was awake, his head raised, ears sharp, body tense. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't move. Just stared at the door. Then she smelled it, faint but distinct. Metal. Smoke. Footsteps outside, crunching through wet leaves. Ilara's heart lurched. She grabbed the rifle and crept to the window. Through a slit in the curtain, she saw a man standing at the edge of the clearing. He was tall, wrapped in a long coat, a rifle slung over his shoulder. His face was shadowed by a hood. A hunter. She stepped back, pulse pounding. "They're here," she whispered. "They came back for you." Cale's growl rumbled low and deep, so powerful it vibrated in her chest. He staggered to his feet, his wound still wrapped in the blood-stained cloth. "You can't fight like this," she said desperately. "You're hurt." He ignored her, pacing toward the door. "Cale, please," she begged. "You'll die out there." But when she said his name, he paused. Slowly, he turned his head toward her. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she felt something like a voice inside her mind. "Trust me." The words weren't spoken aloud, yet she heard them as clearly as her own heartbeat. She gasped, stumbling back. What are you?" Before she could speak again, Cale turned and pushed through the half-open door, vanishing into the mist. "Cale," she cried, running after him, but the cold air hit her like a wall. Outside, the forest was alive again, every sound magnified. She could see Cale's dark shape moving low to the ground, circling the clearing. The hunter raised his gun, and the air split with the crack of a shot. No. Ilara fired her own rifle without thinking. The shot went wide, slamming into a tree trunk. The sound sent birds scattering into the sky. The hunter turned toward her, startled. That brief distraction was enough. Cale lunged from the side, a blur of black and gold. The man screamed as Cale slammed into him, the rifle flying from his hands. For a terrifying moment, all Ilara could see was motion, teeth, claws, mud, a flailing human arm. Then silence. She ran forward, panting, heart in her throat. The hunter lay motionless in the mud, Cale standing over him, chest heaving. Blood stained his fur again, but it wasn't his own. "Oh God," she whispered. "Cale." He turned toward her, eyes burning, brighter than ever, molten gold glowing like fire. The sight stopped her cold. The air around him shimmered faintly, the mist bending toward him like metal drawn to a magnet. His wound, still bleeding moments ago, seemed to close right before her eyes. "What is happening?" she breathed. Cale took a step forward, then another, slow, hesitant. His breathing was ragged. The golden light pulsed once more in his eyes, and then, impossibly, his shape began to change. It started with a ripple through the air, like heat above asphalt. His body shimmered, distorted, bones shifting beneath skin. The sound was quiet but terrible, the grinding of transformation. Ilara stumbled back, eyes wide. The wolf's form blurred, fur turning to skin, claws retracting, limbs reshaping. The air around him glowed for one blinding heartbeat, and then it was gone. Where the great wolf had stood, a man now knelt in the mud. He was tall and lean, his body covered in scars and dirt, his long black hair plastered to his shoulders. His skin glowed faintly in the grey light, and his eyes, still those same impossible golden eyes, locked onto hers. Ilara couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. He looked up, voice hoarse, deep, strange. "You shielded me," he said softly. She stared at him, shaking her head. No. No, that's not. You did, he said again, his gaze steady. The night of the storm. You saved my life. Ilara took a step back, gripping the rifle tighter. You're not real, she whispered. You can't be. I am as real as you are, he said, struggling to stand. His legs trembled beneath him. And I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid. His voice was like thunder softened by sorrow. She swallowed hard, unable to tear her gaze away. You were the wolf. He nodded slowly. Kale. My name is Kale. Ilara's heart raced. What are you? For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, quietly, something that should have died long ago. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she didn't understand. Behind them, Rune let out a soft, frightened whimper. Kale's head turned instantly, the golden light in his eyes softening. He knelt and opened his arms. The cub hesitated only a moment before bounding toward him, pressing its small body against his chest. Ilara watched, frozen, her mind spinning. This man, this creature, had been the beast she'd nursed back to life. The same one who had listened to her heartbreak by the fire, who had protected her through the storm. The same one whose golden eyes had haunted her dreams. She lowered the rifle slowly. Kale, she said, barely more than a whisper. What happens now? He looked up at her, those impossible eyes glowing softly in the mist. Now, he said, voice rough but certain, the world you thought you knew begins to change. And behind him, deep in the forest, another howl answered, long, cold, and close. Kale's gaze hardened. They've found me. Ilara's hands trembled as she looked past him into the trees, the shadows shifting like something alive. The danger that had haunted her nights was real. And now she knew it wasn't over. It was only beginning. Ilara's mind refused to process what she was seeing. Kale, the creature she'd cared for, the beast she'd bled beside, was standing before her as a man. A man with eyes that still burned like molten gold, his breath steaming in the cold morning air. She could hear her heartbeat, fast and loud in her ears. You're human, she whispered. He turned to face her fully, his bare feet sinking into the mud, the blood of the fallen hunter pooling near his shadow. I was born human, he said quietly. But not like you. My kind were changed long ago. His voice was rough, deep, carrying the cadence of someone who spoke rarely but meant every word. Ilara took a hesitant step closer. The morning light revealed more of him, the scars across his shoulders, the strange markings faintly glowing on his skin like threads of fire. He wasn't just strong, he looked ancient. What do you mean, your kind? She asked. You're saying there are more of you? Kale's expression darkened. There were, he said, his tone heavy. Not many remain. She swallowed. So you're, what? A shapeshifter? He nodded once. We were called the Varakai, guardians of the wild places, bound to the old ways. But we were hunted for generations. Some by humans. Some by our own kind. Ilara stared at him, her voice barely audible. Is that who was out there? The one you were hiding from? His golden eyes flickered toward the forest. Yes. And they won't stop until I'm dead. The words sank into her like cold water. Then why come here? Why bring them to my home? Kale met her gaze, and there was pain in his eyes, not anger. I didn't mean to, he said. When I was caught in that trap, I thought I would die. But I felt something, calling. A warmth in the storm. It led me here, to you. Ilara shook her head. That's impossible. Perhaps, Kale said softly. But I would not be alive without you, Ilara. Her name in his voice sent a shiver through her. He said it with a strange reverence, as if he were tasting it, memorizing it. I don't understand, she said. You're some kind of supernatural warrior, and yet you needed me. Kale looked away, his jaw tightening. Even the strong bleed. Even the cursed fall. For a moment, silence settled between them, heavy and electric. The cub Rune nudged Kale's leg, whining softly. Kale crouched, brushing a hand over the cub's fur. The gesture was gentle, heartbreakingly human. Ilara watched him, the confusion in her chest warring with a strange sense of empathy. You're not like what I imagined monsters to be, she said finally. Kale's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. That's because I'm not the monster here. She frowned. Then who is? Kale straightened, looking toward the woods. The mist seemed to tremble with tension. His name is Draven. My brother. The fire crackled in the hearth that night, casting long shadows against the cabin walls. Ilara sat across from Kale, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. She'd given him one of her grandfather's old shirts and a blanket, though it fit him loosely. He sat quietly, watching the flames, his face unreadable. So, she said finally, breaking the silence, you're a shapeshifter with a murderous brother. That's a lot to take in. Kale inclined his head. I understand. Why is he after you? She asked. He hesitated. Because I refused him. Refused him what? Kale's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw the wolf again, the same fierce, unbroken gaze. Draven believes our kind should rise again. That we should rule the world of men, not hide from it. I believed we should protect it. Ilara frowned. Protect it? After everything humans did to you? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You think mercy makes one weak? No, she said quietly. But it can make you a target. He nodded. It has. The way he said it made something inside her ache. He carried centuries of sorrow in his tone, a loneliness she recognized all too well. After a while, she asked, if he's your brother, won't he know where you are? Kale's gaze darkened. He already does. The bond of blood is not easily broken. Her pulse quickened. Then what do we do? We prepare, he said simply. And when he comes, we fight. Ilara let out a breath, half a laugh. I'm no warrior, Kale. I can barely chop wood without hurting myself. He turned his head toward her, eyes gleaming faintly in the firelight. You stood between me and death, he said. That makes you braver than most soldiers I've known. Her cheeks flushed at the words. That was different. I didn't know what you were. And you helped me anyway, he said softly. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped, the wind sighed through the trees, and the air between them grew thick with something unspoken, something that felt dangerously close to trust. 2 days passed. The forest seemed quieter than before, too quiet. Even the birds had stopped singing. Kale rarely left the cabin, but when he did, Ilara could feel the forest itself react. The mist followed him, the wind shifted, as though the woods knew who he was. At night, she dreamed of wolves, not one, but many, their eyes glowing like fire through endless trees. She'd wake gasping, Kale always already awake, as if he heard the same dreams whispering in his mind. On the third morning, she found him outside, shirtless, standing in the mist. The early light turned his breath to silver. He was barefoot, his scars catching the dawn. What are you doing out here? She asked, wrapping her cardigan tighter. He didn't turn. Listening. To what? The forest remembers, he said. It warns me. Ilara stepped closer, glancing around. Warns you of what? He finally looked at her, eyes sharp. That is close. Before she could respond, Rune barked suddenly from inside the cabin. The sound was high and urgent. Ilara's stomach twisted. Kale. He was already moving. In seconds, he was through the door, grabbing the cub by the scruff just as the window shattered inward. Glass exploded across the floor. Something dark slammed into the wall, a shadow in human form, moving with impossible speed. Ilara screamed, ducking behind the table. Kale shoved Rune toward her. Take him. The shadow straightened, and Ilara's breath caught. It was another man, taller than Kale, with eyes the color of blood and hair silver as frost. His smile was wrong, too sharp, too wide. Brother, the man said. His voice was smooth as silk and cold as iron. You've been hiding in interesting company. Draven, Kale growled, his hands curling into fists. Ilara clutched Rune tightly, backing toward the corner. Draven's gaze flicked toward her, curious and cruel. Ah, the human healer. How quaint. Did you tell her what you really are? Kale stepped between them. Leave her out of this. Draven laughed. Always the protector. You were born to kneel beside mortals, weren't you? I was born to keep balance, Kale said, his voice low and dangerous. You've forgotten what that means. Draven's grin widened. Balance is for the weak. We are gods in skin, Kale. And you waste your power hiding in the woods with broken humans. His eyes flicked to Elara. Or perhaps you've grown attached. Kale moved faster than she could see. One moment he stood across the room, the next, his hand was at Draven's throat, pinning him to the wall. The cabin trembled under the force of it. Do not speak her name, Kale snarled. Draven only smiled wider. You've changed, brother. His gaze turned sly. Does she know what happens when your kind bonds to a human? Kale froze. What does he mean? Elara whispered. Draven chuckled. Tell her, Kale. Tell her how the Varakai curse works. Tell her what it costs. Enough, Kale snapped, tightening his grip. But Draven's words cut through the air like knives. Every bond you make, every thread you tie to a mortal life, it drains you. It weakens you. The more you care, the more human you become. And when she dies, you'll die with her. Elara's blood went cold. That's not true. Kale's silence was answer enough. Draven's smile was cruel. You see, even monsters can fall in love, but it never ends well. With a roar, Kale threw him through the shattered window. Draven hit the ground outside, rolling effortlessly to his feet. His laughter echoed through the forest. This isn't over, brother, he called, backing into the mist. You can't protect her forever. And then he was gone. The forest fell silent again, broken glass glittering on the floor. Elara stood frozen, Rune trembling in her arms. Kale turned toward her, his expression unreadable. Blood streaked his hand where he'd gripped the shards. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Elara shook her head. Is it true? What he said? Kale hesitated, then nodded once. Our bond is dangerous. If I let it deepen, it ties my life to yours. She stared at him, disbelief and fear tangling in her chest. So if I die, then so do I. The words dropped like stones into the silence. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire hissed softly behind them. Finally, Elara whispered, then maybe you shouldn't stay here. Kale's eyes met hers, pained, fierce, unyielding. If I leave, he will come for you. He will burn this place to the ground. My curse is already yours, Elara. The only choice now is to survive it. The forest wind howled outside, carrying with it the faint echo of Draven's laughter. Elara looked into Kale's golden eyes and saw the truth there, not just power, but something deeper. A promise. Whatever hunted them now, they would face it together. And somewhere, hidden behind her fear, a small, dangerous spark of hope began to burn. The days that followed blurred together, filled with tension and quiet dread. Elara tried to act normal, chopping wood, cooking small meals, tending to Rune, but nothing about her world felt normal anymore. Every sound outside the cabin made her heart jump. Every shadow between the trees felt like Draven watching. Kale barely slept. He spent most nights outside, pacing the perimeter of the cabin like a guardian spirit, his senses sharp and restless. When he did come inside, he was silent, eyes distant, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. One morning, Elara found him standing by the frozen stream, the mist swirling around his feet. His breath came out in steady clouds, his golden eyes scanning the forest. You haven't rested, she said softly. I don't need to, he replied without looking at her. That's not true. Even wolves need to breathe. He finally turned, a ghost of a smile brushing his lips. You sound like my mother. Then she must have been smart. She was, he said quietly. And brave. She died trying to stop Draven. Elara's heart sank. Your own brother? Kale nodded. He wasn't always this way. He was once kind. But when the humans hunted us, something broke in him. He believed mercy was weakness. He started killing to prove we were gods. Elara looked at him, the morning light soft against his face. And you still believe there's hope for him? I did, Kale said. Until he came for you. A silence hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Elara looked away, her breath visible in the cold air. So what happens now? Kale walked closer until his shadow fell across hers. Now, he said, I make sure he never touches you again. That night, Kale began preparing something she didn't understand. He drew strange markings on the floor using ash and salt, speaking words in a language that sounded older than the wind. Ilara watched from the corner, holding Rune in her arms. What are you doing? A protection circle, he said. If Draven finds this place, it will hold him long enough for you to escape. You're not serious. He didn't look up. I am. I'm not leaving you to fight him alone, Kale. His voice softened. You don't have to fight. You just have to live. She stepped closer, shaking her head. Stop talking like that's easy. You think I can walk away after everything? His hand froze mid-motion. If you stay, I can't protect you from what I am. Ilara met his gaze, unflinching. You already did. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled quietly between them, the air thick with the smell of smoke and pine resin. Finally, Kale straightened, his face shadowed by firelight. Then you must take the oath. She frowned. What oath? He moved closer, his voice low. A bond of trust between my kind and yours. It links our strength. But once made, it cannot be undone. Ilara hesitated. What does it mean? It means, he said, eyes glowing faintly, that I would feel your pain, your fear, your heartbeat. And you would feel mine. Her chest tightened. That sounds dangerous. It is, he admitted. But it is the only way I can keep you safe. She searched his face for deceit and found none, only exhaustion and truth. Slowly, she nodded. Then show me how. Kale drew a shallow cut across his palm with a silver dagger, the blood gleaming like liquid light. He handed her the blade. One drop, he said softly. Her hands trembled, but she pressed the blade lightly against her palm. A red bead welled up. Kale took her hand in his, rough, warm, and steady. He brought their palms together. The moment their blood touched, the room seemed to shift. A rush of heat flooded her veins, bright and fierce. Her vision blurred. She saw flashes, the forest under moonlight, a pack of wolves running through the snow, the echo of Kale's laughter long ago, then pain, fire, Draven's face twisted with rage. She gasped, pulling back, her knees giving way. Kale caught her easily, his hand steady on her back. It's done, he whispered. Ilara's pulse raced. What was that? Our lives, he said simply. Now bound. She looked into his eyes, glowing faintly in the dark. What happens if one of us dies? Kale's expression didn't change. The other follows. Her heart thudded. You didn't tell me that part. I did, he said quietly. You just didn't want to hear it. She stared at him, breath unsteady. You tied yourself to me, Kale. Why? Because I already was, he said. The words hit her harder than any weapon. For the first time in years, she didn't feel broken. She felt seen. He turned away before she could answer. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we move. Move where? To end this, he said. Before he ends us. They left at dawn. The forest was shrouded in mist, the air sharp with frost. Kale moved ahead, silent and sure-footed, his body already shifting into something between man and wolf, faster, stronger. Ilara followed close, Rune trotting at her heels. Where are we going? She asked. To an old Varakai fortress, Kale said. Hidden in the mountains. It's where Draven will strike. He wants the bloodline, he wants me. Ilara frowned. Why risk walking into his trap? Because, Kale said, glancing back, sometimes the only way to survive a trap is to close it from the inside. They traveled for hours, the sun barely visible through the thick clouds. The path wound higher and steeper until the trees gave way to cliffs of grey stone. Every step felt heavier. Ilara stumbled once, catching herself against a fallen branch. Kale turned instantly, his hand steadying her arm. Careful. I'm fine, she said, breathless. You don't have to watch me every second. His mouth twitched. The oath doesn't give me a choice. She looked at him sharply. You can feel me, can't you? Yes, he said simply. Your heartbeat. Your fear. Your courage. Her cheeks flushed. That's intrusive. He smiled faintly. Then stop feeling so much. Easy for you to say, she muttered. As they walked, Cale's mood grew darker. He moved like a predator sensing danger. He's near, he murmured. Draven's scent is everywhere. Ilara tightened her grip on the knife he'd given her. How many of them are there? Too many. They reached a narrow gorge where the mountain split into two cliffs. Snow drifted lazily from above. Cale stopped abruptly, sniffing the air. Something's wrong. Ilara froze. What do you mean? Runes, he said, scanning the rocks. Old magic. Before she could ask what he meant, the ground beneath them shuddered. A line of fire ripped across the snow, circling them in a ring of orange light. Cale's eyes widened. It's a trap. The flames rose higher, twisting like living serpents. From the shadows beyond the ring, shapes emerged, men, tall and pale, their eyes glowing red. Draven's hunters, Cale growled. The nearest one stepped forward, holding a silver spear. The exile returns, he sneered. Our master sends his regards. Cale lunged before the man could blink. In a blur of motion, he shifted, bones cracking, fur erupting across his skin, his body growing massive. The wolf form was darker than night, his eyes blazing gold. He struck with terrifying speed, claws slashing, teeth flashing. Two hunters fell before they could cry out. Ilara's heart pounded as she ducked behind a rock, rune pressed against her chest. Cale was a blur of fury, but the hunters were many. Silver weapons cut through the air, each swing humming with ancient power. Cale roared as one blade slashed across his shoulder. The sound wasn't human, it shook the mountains. Ilara felt it in her chest, burning where their bond tied them. Cale, she cried, clutching her side in pain. He turned at her voice, just long enough for another spear to strike him in the back. He fell to one knee, snarling. Something inside Ilara snapped. She grabbed a fallen spear, its weight almost too heavy, and ran into the circle. Get away from him, she screamed. One of the hunters turned, amused. Little human, you should. She drove the spear into his chest before he could finish. The light in his eyes went out instantly. Cale's head snapped toward her, shock flashing through his golden gaze. Ilara. But the flames around them surged higher, and from the shadows beyond, a voice rolled like thunder. Well done, brother, Draven called. You brought her right to me. Ilara turned. Draven stepped from the smoke, silver hair gleaming, his eyes burning red. His smile was all teeth. Cale struggled to his feet, blood dripping from his wounds. Let her go. Draven chuckled. You really don't understand, do you? She's the key, Cale. The oath you made has tied you to her body, soul, and power. If I kill her, your strength becomes mine. Ilara's breath caught. You planned this. Of course, Draven said. Love is the oldest trap there is. Cale's roar split the air, shaking the earth. The fire bent inward, bursting apart in a shockwave of golden light. For a moment, everything froze, the wind, the snow, even the hunters. Then Cale struck. He moved like lightning, tearing through the circle, his claws igniting with golden fire. Draven met him head-on, their clash sending sparks into the sky. The mountain trembled. Rocks split. The air screamed with power. Ilara could only watch, helpless, terrified, her heart pounding in her throat. Rune barked wildly, pressing against her legs. Cale, she shouted. You can't do this alone. He turned his head just enough to look at her and smiled, the faintest, saddest smile she had ever seen. I told you, he said through the bond, his voice echoing in her mind. I don't fight alone anymore. The world exploded in light. The world became nothing but light, sound, and pain. The mountain shook, fire splitting through the snow like veins of molten gold. Ilara hit the ground hard, the force knocking the air from her lungs. She could hear Rune's frightened cries, Cale's roar echoing like thunder across the valley, and Draven's laughter cutting through it all like the edge of a blade. When the light faded, the world had changed. Half the mountainside was burning, flames leaping high, sparks raining down. The snow melted into steam. Cale and Draven stood at the center of it all, locked in a battle that didn't seem human. Kale's body glowed with golden light, his wolf form towering, muscles rippling beneath his fur. Draven moved like a shadow, fast, sleek, his silver hair a blur, his claws slicing through air thick with power. Every time they collided, the ground cracked. Ilara stumbled to her feet, dizzy, her ears ringing. "Kale," she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the chaos. Rune pressed against her legs, whining. The heat from the fire seared her skin, but she couldn't move, she couldn't look away. Kale struck again and again, his fury unrelenting. But Draven was stronger, older, his movements precise and cruel. Still clinging to the weak, Draven snarled, slamming Kale into the rock wall. "Still believing love will save you." Kale's golden eyes blazed. It already did. He lunged, jaws closing around Draven's shoulder. Blood spilled black against the snow. Draven howled in rage, driving his claws into Kale's side. The pain tore through Ilara like lightning, their bond flaring. She fell to her knees, gasping, clutching her stomach where the echo of his wound burned. "Stop," she cried, her voice breaking. "Please, stop." Kale turned for the briefest instant, enough for Draven to strike again. A flash of silver, a blur of claws, and Kale was thrown backward, crashing into the snow with a sound that made Ilara's heart seize. Draven stalked forward, his smile twisted. "You never learn, little brother. You should have stayed hidden." Ilara ran forward before she could think. The world narrowed to the space between them, Kale bleeding in the snow, Draven raising his hand for the killing blow. "Leave him alone," she screamed. Draven looked up, eyes blazing red. "Ah, the fragile one." His voice was mocking, smooth as poison. "I almost forgot you were still breathing." He moved faster than her eyes could follow. One moment, he was standing over Kale. The next, he was in front of her, his hand closing around her throat. The air vanished from her lungs. Her feet left the ground. "So this is what he chose over his kind," Draven murmured, studying her with cruel fascination. "A mortal woman with a broken womb and a brave tongue. Tell me, did he tell you what happens when one of your kind dies while bound to one of mine?" Ilara clawed at his grip, choking, her vision darkening. Kale tried to move, but every step looked like agony. "Don't," she gasped. "Don't touch him." Draven's smile widened. "Oh, I won't. I'll touch you." A blast of energy surged from Kale before Draven could finish. It hit him like a hammer, sending him sprawling backward. Ilara collapsed to her knees, coughing. The air around Kale shimmered gold, his body shaking as if the power inside him was too much to contain. Draven rose, his face twisted with fury. "You're burning yourself alive, Kale." Kale's voice was low, guttural, otherworldly. "Then I'll burn with her." He raised his head, and for the first time, Ilara saw what true rage looked like, not blind fury, but the kind born of love, grief, and desperation. His body began to glow brighter, the gold turning white-hot. The mountain roared in answer. Draven lunged. The two brothers collided in an explosion of light and flame that swallowed everything. Ilara screamed as the shockwave tore through her. She hit the ground hard, the air knocked out of her lungs again. When she opened her eyes, the sky was red. The snow had melted to ash. The mountain trembled beneath her. Through the haze, she saw Kale and Draven locked in the heart of the fire, their forms barely human now, two gods made of rage. Draven struck first, claws sinking deep into Kale's chest. Kale didn't flinch. Instead, he grabbed his brother's arm and pulled him close, whispering something Ilara couldn't hear. Then the golden light flared again, brighter than the sun. Both of them vanished in the blaze. The sound that followed was like thunder breaking the world apart. When it ended, the forest was silent. Ilara lay still, staring at the scorched sky. The flames were dying. The wind howled softly through the valley. She pushed herself up, her body shaking. "Kale," she whispered. "Kale." There was no answer. Smoke rose in thin columns from the blackened snow. The air smelled of burnt pine and blood. She stumbled forward, her boots crunching through ash. Then she saw him, Kale, lying motionless near the shattered cliffside, half human, half wolf, his body broken and still. Ilara dropped to her knees beside him, tears spilling down her face. "No," she whispered. Please, no. Don't you dare leave me now. His chest moved faintly, one breath, shallow and strained. Cale, she sobbed, cradling his head. Stay with me, please. His eyes opened weakly, golden light flickering. It's done, he rasped. Draven is gone. Her tears fell on his face. You can't be, you're not. He smiled faintly. You broke the curse. I didn't do anything. You cared, he whispered. That's all it ever took. His eyes fluttered shut, and for a moment, she thought he was gone. Cale, she screamed, shaking him. Don't you dare. Then she felt it, a pulse of warmth through their bond, faint but steady. His body trembled, and slowly, the golden light spread again through his veins, sealing the wounds one by one. Ilara gasped. You're healing. Cale's voice was barely audible. Your heart pulled me back. She laughed through her tears. Guess we're even now. He smiled weakly. Not yet. And then he passed out in her arms. Morning came slowly. The fires had burned out, leaving behind blackened earth and a sky streaked with grey. The air was cold again, but clean, almost sacred. Ilara sat beside Cale, who lay wrapped in a blanket near the remains of the fire. Rune nestled beside his chest, whining softly. She had no idea how long she'd been awake. Her body ached, her hands were raw, but she didn't care. Cale was breathing. That was all that mattered. When his eyes finally opened, she almost sobbed with relief. You're awake. He blinked slowly, then looked around. The mountain. Gone, she said. Or at least what's left of it. You nearly burned it to the ground. He winced, sitting up. And Draven? Ilara hesitated. I don't know. I didn't find him. Cale's expression hardened. Then he's not dead. You can't fight him again, she said quickly. Not like this. You'll kill yourself. His gaze softened when it met hers. You would rather he kill you? She shook her head. No. I'd rather neither of us die. Cale sighed, running a hand through his tangled hair. You speak as if it's simple. It is, she said stubbornly. You said our bond ties us together. Then if one of us falls, we both do. So maybe that's not a curse anymore. He looked at her, silent for a long moment. You'd risk everything for me. I already did, she said. You just weren't awake to see it. Something in his face broke the wall he'd held for centuries. His shoulders slumped, his voice rough. You don't understand. My kind doesn't get second chances. The world doesn't forgive monsters. She reached out, taking his hand. Then maybe it's time it does. He looked down at their joined hands, her small, human fingers tangled with his scarred ones, and for the first time, he let himself believe her. They stayed in the ruined valley for days, rebuilding what little they could. Cale's strength returned slowly. He spent hours staring into the distance, as if waiting for Draven's shadow to reappear. But it never did. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ilara walked to the edge of the clearing. The air smelled of pine and rain again. Cale joined her silently. You know, she said, I used to think I was broken. That losing the chance to have a family meant I'd lost my purpose. Cale turned to her. And now? She smiled softly. Now I realize family isn't blood. It's who stands beside you when the world burns. He said nothing, but his eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the sunset. After a moment, he reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled something out, a small, crystal pendant, glowing faintly gold. What is that? She asked. A heartstone, he said. The last remnant of the Varakai bond. It carries our life, our power, and our choice. Choice? He nodded. If I crush it, the bond breaks. You'll be free. Ilara stared at the pendant, then at him. Free from what? From me, he said quietly. From danger. From this life. She shook her head slowly. I don't want to be free from you, Cale. Ilara. She stepped closer, her voice steady. You gave me a reason to live again. You taught me that love isn't about perfection, it's about surviving the fire together. So no, I won't be free. Not from this. He looked at her for a long, silent moment. Then he closed his hand around the pendant, not to crush it, but to protect it. Then I will guard this, he said softly, as I guard you. Elara smiled, tears shining in her eyes. I know you will. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and something new, hope. Kale wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. The golden glow in his eyes softened, reflecting the dawn breaking over the horizon. Rune barked once, chasing a butterfly through the air, the sound echoing like laughter. Elara leaned her head against Kale's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. For the first time, it matched her own, one rhythm, one life, one promise. The war was over. The scars would remain. But together, they had found what neither had dared to hope for, peace. And as the sun rose higher over the smoking valley, the last of the mist burned away, revealing not destruction, but rebirth. For weeks, peace settled over the valley like a long exhale. The forest, once burned and broken, began to heal. New grass pushed through the blackened earth. Streams ran clear again. The air carried the scent of pine and rain instead of smoke and blood. Elara and Kale rebuilt the cabin piece by piece, a new roof, new walls, stronger than before. Rune grew larger by the day, his once small frame now sleek and quick, his eyes bright with mischief. For the first time in months, Elara could breathe without fear. But peace, she would soon learn, is a fragile thing. It started with a dream. She was standing in a vast field of silver snow beneath a red moon. The air shimmered with cold, and far in the distance, she saw a figure walking toward her, tall, cloaked in shadow. As it came closer, she saw a familiar face beneath the hood. Draven. But he looked different, younger, calmer, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she remembered. You think you've won, he said. You think he's safe. But the bond between you is not a gift. It is a chain. Elara tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Draven took another step closer, eyes glowing faintly red. When the moon turns again, the bond will demand its due. You will feel what he feels, and when the curse calls him home, it will call you too. She reached out to stop him, but her fingers passed through him like smoke. Tell him, Draven whispered. Tell him he can't run from blood. Then the world shattered and Elara woke screaming. Kale was beside her instantly, his hand on her shoulder, his golden eyes sharp with concern. Elara, what is it? Her chest heaved. A dream, she gasped. It was him. Draven. Kale's expression hardened. He's dead. No, she said, shaking her head. He spoke to me. He said the bond isn't done. He said it will, her voice faltered. It will take us both. Kale was silent for a long time. Then he stood, pacing toward the window. The morning light painted his bare shoulders gold. He's lying, he said at last, though the words lacked conviction. You don't believe that, she said quietly. Kale's jaw tightened. He shouldn't have the power to reach into dreams. Not unless. Unless what? Unless his spirit survived the fire. Elara's stomach turned cold. Can that happen? Kale didn't answer. His eyes were distant, his voice low. Varakai souls don't fade easily. When our kind die with hate in their hearts, they become something worse, bound to the shadows, feeding on what's left of their power. You mean ghosts? He nodded. Wraiths. And if Draven has become one, the world is not safe. Elara rose from the bed, her hands trembling. Then what do we do? Kale turned toward her, his face grim. We find the source before he finds us. They spent the day preparing. Kale reforged old blades from the remains of the hunter's weapons, their edges glinting faintly in the sun. Elara packed food, herbs, and a small pouch of salt and ash, the materials for the old wards he'd taught her. Rune paced restlessly, sensing the unease in the air. By dusk, the three of them stood at the edge of the valley. The forest whispered around them, the wind carrying faint echoes that made Elara's skin prickle. Where do we start? She asked. Kale pointed north. There's an old ruin beyond the ridge, one of our sacred places. If his spirit lingers, it will be there. Elara took his hand. Then we go together. He nodded once, the faintest smile on his lips. Always. They walked through the night, guided by moonlight. The forest was alive with small sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the crunch of frost underfoot. But beneath it all, there was something else, a hum, low and steady, like the heartbeat of something vast and unseen. It grew stronger the closer they came to the ridge. The trees thinned, giving way to a wide clearing of stone and frost. In the center stood a ruin, a crumbling temple carved into the mountain, its entrance marked by 2 statues of wolves. One was whole. The other lay shattered. Kale stopped. "This was once the heart of the Varakai," he said quietly, "where we swore our oaths. Where Draven and I were brothers." Ilara looked around, unease prickling her skin. "It feels wrong." Kale's eyes glowed faintly. "It is. Something stirs here." Before she could answer, the wind shifted. The torches along the walls flickered to life one by one, though no hand had touched them. And in the center of the ruins, a figure appeared, dark, flickering like smoke, its shape human but its edges blurring with shadow. "Draven. Did you really think death would hold me, brother?" His voice was everywhere and nowhere at once. Kale's muscles tensed. "You should have stayed in the dark." "Why?" Draven's smile was cold. "So you could live pretending you're something better than us. You carry my curse, Kale. You think binding yourself to a mortal will save you? It will only destroy her." "Enough," Kale roared. The ground cracked beneath his feet as his power surged. Draven laughed, the sound echoing through the ruins. "Then watch her fall." Before Ilara could move, the shadow leapt toward her. Kale lunged, throwing himself between them. The impact sent both brothers crashing to the stone floor, their light and darkness colliding again in a storm of raw energy. "Kale!" Ilara cried, reaching for him, but the force of the blast threw her backward. She hit the ground hard, the world spinning. When she looked up, the air was alive with light, gold and red, twisting together, battling for dominance. "Stay out of this, Ilara," Kale shouted. She shook her head. "Not this time." Pulling the pouch of ash and salt from her coat, she began to draw the ward symbols Kale had shown her on the ground, her fingers trembling. The moment she finished, the circle flared to life, glowing blue-white. "Spirit of darkness," she whispered, her voice shaking but steady. "You have no hold here." Draven turned, his eyes narrowing. "Foolish girl." He slashed his hand through the air, sending a wave of red energy toward her. But the ward pulsed bright, absorbing the strike. Kale took the opening, his claws catching Draven's throat. "You will not touch her again." Draven's laughter turned to a hiss of pain. "You think you can kill what's already dead?" Kale's voice was low, filled with fury. "No. But I can set you free." He drove his hand into Draven's chest, golden light pouring from his palm. Draven screamed, a sound like the tearing of the sky, as the light consumed him. His body fractured, splintered into 1,000 shards of red and black, then vanished into the wind. The ruins fell silent. Kale collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Ilara ran to him, catching his face in her hands. "Kale, are you all right?" He looked up at her weakly, his eyes dimming. "It's done." But even as he spoke, she saw the faint glow of red still burning beneath his skin. Kale didn't speak for hours. He sat by the fire, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. The wound from the battle had closed, but something inside him had changed, something darker. Ilara watched him, worry tightening her chest. "You're not healing." He looked up, his golden eyes shadowed. "I took part of him with me. When I drew his spirit out, it tried to cling." Her blood ran cold. "You mean he's still inside you?" Kale nodded slowly. "A fragment. His hatred, his hunger. If I lose control." "No," she said firmly. "You won't. You're stronger than him." He smiled faintly. "You believe that?" "I have to," she said. "Because if I stop believing in you, then everything we fought for means nothing." Kale looked at her for a long time, the firelight dancing across his features. "You shouldn't have to carry this burden." "You're not a burden," she said softly. "You're the reason I'm still standing." For the first time, he let himself rest his forehead against hers. The contact sent a wave of warmth through her, their bond thrumming like a heartbeat. "Then whatever comes," he whispered, "we face it together." The days turned to weeks again. Slowly, Kale regained strength, though the red shimmer beneath his skin never truly faded. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching, Elara saw him tense, eyes darkening, his hands curling as though fighting something unseen. Each time, she took his hand, grounding him. Each time, he calmed. One night, under a sky filled with stars, he finally spoke what had haunted him. "If I lose control," he said, "if I become like him, you must end it." She froze. "Kale. Promise me," he said, voice low, urgent. "Swear that you will not let me become the monster he was." Her eyes filled with tears. "Don't ask me that. You have to." She shook her head. "No. I don't believe it will happen. And if it does, then I'll save you, the same way you saved me." Kale stared at her, then sighed, a small, broken sound that almost sounded like laughter. "You really are impossible. I learned from the best," she said, smiling through her tears. He reached out, brushing his thumb along her cheek. "Then let's hope you're right." In the months that followed, the forest healed completely. Wildflowers bloomed where fire once raged. Birds returned to the trees. The valley felt alive again, humming with quiet peace. Kale and Elara rebuilt not just their home, but their lives. They hunted, planted, laughed. Rune grew into a proud wolf, loyal and watchful. For the first time, there was no shadow between them, only the promise of a new beginning. But sometimes, in the quiet of night, when the moon hung red over the mountains, Kale would wake with his hand pressed to his chest, eyes glowing faintly, and for just a heartbeat, Elara thought she saw another light beneath his skin, flickering crimson like an echo. She never told him. Instead, she would wrap her arms around him until his breathing slowed and whisper, "You're home. You're safe." And for that night, at least, it was true. Because even if darkness waited beyond the horizon, even if the curse would one day return, they had earned this peace. Not through magic. Not through destiny. But through love, the kind that refuses to break, even when the world does. And as dawn rose over the valley, painting the forest gold, Elara knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Together. Spring came to the valley dressed in gold and song. The trees bloomed again, and wildflowers spread like spilled paint across the meadows. For a while, the world felt reborn, and Elara allowed herself to believe they were finally safe. Kale built a small forge near the river, shaping iron and silver into tools, not weapons. Rune hunted rabbits and deer, returning proud and taller each week. The forest no longer whispered of ghosts, it sang of renewal. But peace, Elara had learned, always carried a shadow. It began with a change in the sky. One morning, as dawn broke, Kale stepped outside and froze. The light was strange, duller, red-tinted, as if the sun itself bled through the clouds. He looked up, and his breath caught. The moon, still faint in the morning, had turned crimson. Elara came to his side, rubbing her arms against the chill. "Is it an eclipse?" Kale didn't answer at first. His eyes glowed faintly, the golden light flickering uneasily. "No. It's the blood moon. It hasn't risen in centuries." Her heart stuttered. "What does it mean?" "It means the veil between our world and the spirit realm is thinning," he said quietly. "And if the moon turns red, it feeds every old curse still lingering on the earth." Elara's blood went cold. "You think it's Draven again?" Kale's gaze didn't leave the sky. "I think his shadow never left." By nightfall, the red moon hung low over the valley, casting everything in a ghostly scarlet glow. The river shimmered like blood, the trees like black spires. Kale stood outside, his bare feet in the grass, his head bowed as if listening. His chest rose and fell in slow, measured breaths. Elara watched him from the doorway. "What do you hear?" she asked softly. "Whispers," he said. "Voices of the dead. The Varakai spirits." She stepped closer. "What are they saying?" "That the seal is breaking." "Seal?" He turned toward her, eyes dark. "The curse that kept our world and theirs apart. The same one that kept Draven from returning." Her stomach clenched. "Then we have to stop it." Kale nodded. "There's a shrine deep in the northern mountains where the first Varakai made the pact. If I can reach it before the moon sets, I might be able to strengthen the seal." "I'm coming with you." No, his answer was sharp, immediate. If the spirits rise, they'll feed on life. You'll be a beacon to them. She folded her arms. I'm not hiding while you risk your life again. Ilara, he said, stepping closer, if something happens to you, I won't survive it. The bond. I don't care, she interrupted. We fight together. That was the promise. Cale's jaw tightened. He saw the determination in her eyes, the fire that never seemed to dim. Finally, he exhaled. Then we leave at first light. They packed little food, a flask of water, salt, and one silver dagger. Rune followed them silently, sensing the gravity in their movements. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the red moon followed, staining the world with its light. The wind carried strange sounds, whispers, sighs, and the faint cry of something neither human nor beast. By nightfall, they reached the mouth of a cave carved into the mountainside. The air there was colder, heavier. Cale lit a torch, the flame burning blue instead of gold. This is it, he said. The path to the shrine runs beneath the mountain. It's sacred ground. Ilara stepped beside him, gripping his hand. Then let's finish what we started. Inside, the walls glowed faintly with ancient runes, carved deep and filled with faint light. As they moved deeper, the whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices, speaking in a tongue Ilara didn't understand. What are they saying? She whispered. Cale's voice was low. They're mourning. For what? For what's coming. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, the ceiling high as a cathedral. In the center stood an altar of black stone surrounded by rings of symbols. Cale knelt beside it, touching the surface with his palm. This is where the first blood oath was sworn. It holds the power of our kind. Ilara knelt beside him. What do you have to do? He looked at her, his eyes glowing faintly. I have to call the spirits and offer a part of myself to renew the seal. It may cost me. How much? He smiled faintly. Enough. Before she could protest, he drew a knife across his palm, pressing his hand against the stone. The runes flared, golden light spilling across the floor. The whispers turned into cries, a wind rising from nowhere. Ilara, he said, voice strained, whatever happens, don't move. She reached for him instinctively, but he pulled away, the air around him crackling with energy. His body shone with light, his voice echoing through the cavern as he chanted words older than language. The earth shook. The red glow of the moon bled through cracks in the ceiling, spilling into the shrine like liquid fire. And then a shadow formed behind him. Ilara's heart stopped. It was Draven, or what was left of him. His form was smoke and flame, his eyes twin embers. Foolish brother, the wraith hissed. You cannot cage me with light. Cale's head snapped up, his golden eyes blazing. You're nothing but ash. Perhaps, Draven whispered, but ash feeds the fire. He surged forward, slamming into Cale's back. The altar flared crimson, the symbols turning black. Cale screamed as the energy ripped through him. Ilara didn't think, she ran forward, shouting his name. The force threw her against the wall, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. She looked up just in time to see Cale collapse, his body flickering between man and wolf. Cale. Draven turned toward her, his form twisting. The bond ties us all. When he falls, so will you. Ilara crawled forward, clutching the silver dagger. Not this time. She drove the blade into the altar, shouting the only word Cale had ever told her meant banish. The light exploded outward, a wave of gold and silver colliding with Draven's red flame. The cavern filled with blinding brilliance, every shadow screaming as it burned. When it was over, the air was still. The altar was cracked in two. Draven was gone. And Cale lay motionless on the ground. Ilara crawled to him, shaking him desperately. Cale, wake up. Please. His pulse was faint. His breathing shallow. She pressed her forehead against his chest, sobbing. Don't you leave me. You promised. For a long time, there was only silence. Then, softly, a whisper brushed against her mind. Ilara. She lifted her head. His eyes opened, golden light flickering weakly. You did it, she whispered. No, he said softly. We did. And then he smiled, tired, peaceful, before his eyes closed again. Kale didn't wake for 3 days. Ilara stayed by his side, tending the small campfire she'd built near the cave entrance. Rune never left Kale's feet, whining quietly. Outside, the red moon had faded. The forest glowed silver under a clean, pale sky. The world felt lighter, as if it had been holding its breath for centuries and finally exhaled. On the morning of the 4th day, Kale stirred. His eyes opened, no longer gold but a softer amber, human and warm. "You're back," Ilara whispered, tears of relief filling her eyes. He smiled weakly. "I told you I'd always come back." She threw her arms around him, sobbing against his shoulder. "You scared me half to death." "I scare myself sometimes," he murmured, resting his chin on her hair. When she finally pulled away, he looked at her with a strange softness. "The bond has changed," he said quietly. "How?" "It feels balanced. Before, it was pain and power. Now it's something else. It doesn't hurt." Ilara smiled faintly. "Maybe it's not a curse anymore." "Maybe," he said, gazing at her. "Or maybe it never was." They stayed at the shrine for several days, helping the spirits of the Varakai find peace. At night, the walls glowed faintly with gold, and Ilara could hear whispers of gratitude carried through the wind. When it was finally time to leave, Kale stood at the entrance, the dawn spilling light across his face. "Will they be free now?" Ilara asked. He nodded. "Yes. Their watch is over." "And yours?" she asked. Kale smiled. "Mine begins again." They walked down the mountain hand in hand, the valley opening before them, green and alive. The forest stretched endlessly, and the river shimmered like glass. Rune ran ahead, barking happily, his tail high. When they reached the cabin, it felt different, not just a shelter anymore, but a home. Kale built a new fire while Ilara cooked, humming softly. For the first time, there was no fear in the silence between them, only peace. After dinner, they sat outside, watching the stars. The air was warm, filled with the chirp of crickets and the distant call of an owl. Kale leaned back, his voice low. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" Ilara smiled. "For once, I don't want to know. I just want this moment." He looked at her, and his hand found hers. "Then we'll hold it," he said, "as long as the world lets us." Weeks passed. Seasons turned again. Life flowed quietly, simple, steady. Kale helped rebuild a nearby village, his strength no longer feared but respected. Ilara grew herbs and taught healing to anyone who sought her. Together, they became the heart of a small, thriving community. The villagers called them the guardians of the valley, the woman who tamed the storm and the wolf who walked as a man. At night, when the moon rose white and pure above the forest, Ilara would lie beside Kale and whisper, "Do you think the past is finally behind us?" And Kale, his arm around her, would answer, "The past sleeps. But even if it wakes, we will not run." Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, she still felt that faint pulse of power between them, the echo of the bond, the living thread that connected their hearts. It no longer frightened her. It felt like part of the world itself, wild, ancient, and alive. Years later, when travelers passed through the valley, they told stories of a golden-eyed guardian and the healer who loved him, of a place where no darkness dared linger, where even the spirits found peace. No one knew their true names. No one knew their scars. But when the moon shone red again centuries later, the valley stayed calm, the light untouched by shadow. Because love, once forged in fire, never fades. It simply becomes legend. Years had passed since the red moon had last bled across the sky. The valley had grown lush again, a cradle of green surrounded by silver peaks. The river's voice was soft, constant, and the great oaks that once burned in fire now stood taller than ever. Life had moved on. But legends never sleep. Ilara woke one morning to Rune's low growl. The wolf stood at the door, ears pricked, eyes sharp. Something in his stance made her heart skip. She glanced at Kale beside her. He was already awake, sitting up, muscles tensed, his golden eyes burning faintly in the dawn light. "What is it?" she whispered. Kale's gaze turned toward the forest. "Something's moving. Too quiet. Too organized." Ilara frowned, wrapping her shawl tighter. Humans. He shook his head slowly. No. Wolves. Your kind. His silence was her answer. She followed him outside. The valley stretched wide and calm, mist coiling low along the ground. Birds sang. But beneath that peace, she could feel it too, a vibration in the air, a low thrum, as if the earth itself waited for something. Then she saw them, dark shapes at the edge of the woods. Wolves, dozens of them, eyes glinting yellow, grey, and amber. They weren't wild beasts. They moved with purpose. Kale's jaw tightened. Varakai. Ilara's breath caught. I thought you said they were gone. I did. His voice was low, unreadable. But maybe I was wrong. The largest of the wolves stepped forward, its fur silver and marked with streaks of black. It shifted as it approached, bones reshaping, fur giving way to skin. In moments, a tall woman stood before them, dressed in furs and leather, her eyes the color of steel. Kale Varin, she said, her tone calm but sharp. The exile who defied his own blood. Kale stepped forward, every muscle alert. Who are you? The woman tilted her head slightly. Lyra of the northern kin. I was told you were dead. You were told wrong. Lyra smiled faintly. So it seems. You've kept yourself busy building a home, hiding among humans. Her gaze flicked toward Ilara. And taking one for a mate. Ilara's heartbeat quickened. I'm not. Kale's hand brushed hers briefly, a silent warning. Why are you here, Lyra? The council has risen again, she said. A new generation of Varakai seeks to reclaim the old lands. We came to ask for your aid. Kale's eyes narrowed. Aid in what? In stopping what's coming, Lyra said simply. The human kingdoms are uniting. They've heard stories of wolves walking as men, and they want the valley for themselves. They march even now, with fire and iron. Ilara's breath caught. Humans are attacking? Lyra nodded. By sunset tomorrow, they'll be here. Kale looked toward the mountains, the same path where the hunters once came, the same road that had carried blood into their peace. And what do you expect from me? Lead us, she said. You were the last alpha of the Varakai. Your name still carries weight. Kale was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he said, I buried that title. Lyra's expression hardened. You can't bury what you are. Her words hung in the cool air like a prophecy. That night, the valley didn't sleep. The wolves camped by the river, their low voices echoing through the mist. Kale walked among them, silent, his eyes distant. Ilara watched him from the doorway, her heart twisting. When he returned, his face was carved in shadow. They're telling the truth, he said quietly. The humans are coming. At least 200. Soldiers. Ilara's stomach dropped. We have to warn the villagers. I already did, he said. They're fleeing north. But if the humans reach the valley, they'll burn everything, the forest, the ruins, the shrine. Everything we rebuilt. Ilara stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. What are you going to do? Kale looked out toward the mist, his jaw tight. What I was born to do. She knew what that meant. Kale. He turned to her, golden eyes blazing. This isn't just about me. It's about every living thing here. If the humans destroy this land, the spirits will rise again, and the curse will start anew. I won't let that happen. Ilara grabbed his hand. Then you won't face it alone. He hesitated. If I call the pack, if I lead them again, there's no turning back. Once the Varakai rise, the world will know we still live. Then let it know, she said fiercely. Let them see who we are. Let them see what love built, not what fear destroyed. Kale stared at her, his heart caught between pride and worry. Finally, he nodded. Then we stand together. The wolves gathered at dawn. The red sun rose over the mountains, casting the valley in firelight. Dozens of Varakai shifted, their forms gleaming like living shadows. The air hummed with power. Kale stood at the front, his shoulders straight, his golden eyes fierce. Ilara stood beside him, bow in hand, rune at her side. When the first drums echoed from beyond the ridge, every heart in the valley stilled. The enemy had come. Hundreds of soldiers spilled from the mountain path, their armor flashing silver, their torches blazing. They marched in tight ranks, the ground trembling under their boots. At their head rode a man in red armor, his banner marked with a sun crossed by a blade. His voice rang through the air. By decree of the Northern Crown, he shouted, "These lands are claimed for mankind. Step aside, beasts, or be purged." Kale's answer was not words, it was a roar that shook the earth. The wolves answered him, their voices joining into one thunderous sound that rolled across the valley like a storm. And then the battle began. The humans fired arrows that flamed in midair. The Varakai leapt, shifting midstride, their bodies blurring between wolf and warrior. Claws met steel. Fire met fang. The valley became chaos. Ilara fought alongside Rune and the smaller wolves, using her bow with deadly precision. Each arrow she loosed carried a whisper of Kale's power through their bond, each shot faster, Traw. Kale tore through the enemy line like lightning, his claws wreathed in golden fire. Every movement was pure rage and grace, a dance of fury that left men scattering in fear. But the humans were many. For every one that fell, two more took his place. Smoke filled the air. Screams rose from both sides. Ilara's arms ached, her lungs burned, but she kept fighting, her mind locked on Kale's presence through their bond, the steady drumbeat of his heart. Then she felt it falter. "Kale," she shouted, spinning. He was surrounded, half a dozen soldiers driving him back with silver blades. One struck his side, another pierced his shoulder. Ilara ran toward him, but before she could reach him, the commander stepped forward, sword raised high. "End the beast," he bellowed. Kale turned, blood streaking his chest, eyes blazing. "Not today." He leapt. The impact shook the ground. The commander fell, his armor crushed. But Kale collapsed with him, his body trembling, the golden light in his eyes flickering. "Kale!" Ilara screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. "Stay with me." He tried to speak, but his breath came in gasps. "The bond." "Don't you dare," she shouted, tears mixing with dirt. "Don't you leave me, not like this." He managed a weak smile. "You said, together." The world blurred with light again. Every wolf in the valley raised its head and howled, a sound so mournful, so fierce, it silenced the battlefield. The golden glow erupted from Kale's body, spreading through every Varakai, through Ilara herself. The fire on the soldiers' torches went out. Their blades shattered. The earth split beneath them, swallowing their weapons whole. When the light faded, the valley was silent. The humans fled. The wolves stood victorious, but Kale lay still. Ilara cradled his head in her lap, sobbing. "You did it. You saved them all." His voice was barely a whisper. "No, Ilara. You did." His hand fell limp in hers. The valley wept with her. It was said later that the sky stayed golden for 3 days after the battle, as if the sun refused to set in honor of the fallen. Ilara buried Kale at the heart of the valley, beneath the great oak that had grown from the ashes of the first fire. The wolves gathered around her in silence, their heads bowed. Rune stood at her side, his golden eyes wet. She marked the grave with a stone carved with runes, words Kale had once spoken to her. "Love is not what binds us. It is what sets us free." 4 weeks after, she wandered the valley in a daze, listening for his voice in the wind, feeling for his warmth in the bond. It was faint, but it was there, a heartbeat in the soil, a whisper in the river. The villagers returned slowly, rebuilding under her guidance. They called her the Lady of the Heartwood, the keeper of the Golden Wolf. She didn't correct them. Years passed. Seasons changed. The world beyond the valley forgot the war, but the wolves did not. They remained hidden, guarding the land in silence. And every night, when the moon rose full, Ilara would stand beneath the oak, close her eyes, and feel him, faint but steady, like a star that never dies. Decades later, a young traveler came to the valley. He'd heard the legends of the healer who tamed the beast, of the golden wolf who died to save mankind. He expected stories, not truth. But when he entered the clearing, he saw a woman standing beneath the oak, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes calm and knowing. At her feet lay a great wolf with fur like sunlight. "Are the stories true?" the traveler asked. Ilara smiled faintly. "They're more than stories. They're reminders." "Reminders of what?" That even monsters can love. And that love can save even the darkest heart. The traveler nodded slowly, bowing his head in respect. And the wolf? Ilara's gaze softened. He never left. The wind stirred the trees then, carrying a low, familiar sound, the distant echo of a wolf's howl, filled with warmth and power. The traveler looked around, eyes wide. Was that? Ilara only smiled. The heart of the world never dies. It just changes its shape. As the sun set, the valley glowed gold once more, and the traveler swore he saw a figure beside her, tall, strong, his eyes the color of the dawn. When he blinked, they were gone. But the howl lingered long after, carrying a single word across the wind. Home. If this story gave you chills, made your heart race, or left you thinking about Kale and Ilara long after the credits roll, then don't just scroll away. Smash that like button to show your love, hit subscribe so you never miss the next epic chapter, and drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment or theory about what comes next. And hey, if you think more people need to feel this story, share it with someone who loves dark romance, fantasy, and stories that hit straight to the heart. Because this isn't the end, it's just the beginning of something bigger. Stay tuned, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next story.